Welcome back to Job Seeker Nation. Of course, we appear here every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Central. My name is Mark Anthony Dyson. And of course, I'm always here trying to push the envelope of job search information along with my co host, Jack Kelly. How are you, sir?
Hey, great. I haven't seen you in like a year. So
Yeah, right.
how corny is that, right? That's so terrible.
Yeah, I know. But this, if there wasn't a little smidge of truth to it,
Yeah.
we just dismiss it completely.
It did
We
seem like a
have,
long time though, didn't it? Right,
yeah, I
Tegan? Like this
know.
whole holidays.
It's been a month. It's been
Yeah.
about a month since we've been on. So we're back now, ready to run this race. But we got to pace ourselves because we got last for the duration. So here we go. We have somebody with us, Teegan Bartos, my buddy, my friend, my
Mhm.
fellow Illinoisan, Chicagoan, kind of, sort of, in a uh, in kind of a different way, but nevertheless, how are you, Tegan?
I am good. I'm excited to be joining you, and I'm excited. We're over 30 degrees today, Mark, in Chicago.
Oh, it's
So
warm.
Yes, yes,
yeah,
it
it's
is a
warm.
warming. It's a
T-shirts and
warming
short
trip.
weather in Chicago. Yeah.
30 degrees still makes a big difference, even though it was -2 the other day.
Yep.
So right now it's 30. So it's a little bit of a heat wave, but it won't get too much better for the next few months. But we'll go ahead and take it anyway. For
Wait.
those of
I got
you,
before we start. Why are
yeah.
you so nice and friendly to the guest, and with me, it's like, hey, Jack.
because
Right, Tegan? Do you
because
notice that?
because it's unconscious
I think I'm being
taking you
taken
for
for
granted.
granted.
That's what it is.
I'm not feeling the love.
That's right. I talk to you all the time. I don't talk to Tegan
Okay.
like that. I
Good point.
talk to you every
Okay.
week for an hour.
Yeah.
So I
I
think
like how he
there's a
says that like
slight
for an
difference.
hour.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I sometimes my wife doesn't get that privilege. So they so and at least you're at the same time. We have to scamper to find time. So that's the way it goes. I'm sorry, Jack. I admit
It's
I take
okay.
you for granted. Forgive
It's
me,
okay.
please. All right. Well, for the rest of you, I don't want to take you for granted because you're taking time from your lunch or your day, whatever you're doing. So thank you again. We're here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Talking about job search. We try to make it fun, interesting, and we try to have somebody to tag along with us, talk about the issues that are related to job search today. We are also streaming on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. No Facebook today. There is something wrong with my Facebook page. It's crazy. Anyway, so we'll be glad to interrupt what we're talking about to kind of get things started to answer your questions and concerns. So join us and please feel free to participate. Say hi to us in the chat, listening and you're watching. You might be doing some other stuff and just listening to us, which is quite okay. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and talk about 2022 a little bit in that sense. What's the one thing job seekers should expect from employers in 2022? Not that we should expect anything real different, should we, Jack?
Well, it'd probably be a continuation, but what I've had when you started saying about Twitter and Facebook, one thing I wanted to bring up is the metaverse. And if you want to try it out, and Tegan, since you're on the show, you're invited. I've been speaking to different um, CEOs of metaverse platforms, and I think we could kind of maybe do the show in virtual reality, which could be really interesting.
It could be
And
interesting. Yeah.
one place it has the Oculus glasses and the handsets. The other one, you don't need the glasses. And you could just get in and picture like we'd all be in virtual reality talking to each other. And if you like, we could, I could get in touch with him. We could try that out and see. I don't know if this would be, across the board in 2022, but I do feel that might be, maybe the latter part of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if some companies are dabbling in interviewing and holding meetings on the metaverse in virtual reality, if nothing else, just to try it out and see.
Yeah.
Marty Constant talks so much about that,
Yes,
and
Yeah.
she does.
in Meta, aka Facebook, They just took 100 employees from Microsoft, and they're really enticing people from Apple to come over with insane bonuses, sign-on bonuses, and
Yeah.
stock options. So
Mhm.
organizations are really heavily investing in it.
Yeah, and we can do the show in person without being in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. I mean, that would be fascinating. We can, I guess we'd set up a room of some type, and we would use the receptacles to meet in person from wherever we are, and we
Yeah.
can have a conversation. We can move around. We can maybe even use a little whiteboard in the back if we want
Yeah.
to. I mean,
Exactly, Mark. Yeah.
it's really a very fascinating thing. Ever since we talked to Marty, I've actually gone a little bit deeper into it, and I'm like, this is real. But to make it show related, people can also do interviews in person or
Yes.
in the metaverse, and I think it would be very interesting on the limits or the lack of limits that there are.
Like one thing too you could do, because there's a big concern about unconscious bias.
Mm,
So
Big old
that
dog.
if you have like an avatar that's just, let's say, neutral, so
yeah,
then they're judging you on your knowledge, your answers, but not on how you look,
right.
your age, your sex, and all that. So
Hmm.
that could be like the, the holy grail of a lot of, HR people are looking for. How do we make sure we, even the playing field so that we're not just making unconscious bias or, conscious bias decisions. So that's kind of, that part also would be really interesting, really helpful.
Yeah, and I think it will work both ways. That if everybody in a meeting had an avatar,
Right.
uh, that the person that's interviewing, unless you've done the research, and that can go both ways, you don't know who the employer really looks like. And to a great degree, you probably could even tweak the sound so that you don't even sound like yourself.
Interesting.
Would
Yeah.
make a very interesting
Yeah.
dynamic. Everybody sounded completely different, so you pass each other in a location that's real without even knowing who each other are. You could be coworkers.
I can definitely see innovative companies leveraging some of these types of interview practices, but I think across the board, organizations won't be jumping into the metaverse anytime
Yeah.
soon, just because so many people don't know how to use it, and it can be a disadvantage to lower income or across the board when it comes to different issues of getting people the resources to be able to interview in that type of capacity.
You're so right, Tegan. So I went to this place I was writing an article for Forbes about the metaverse. So I go visit, the folks invited me over to check it, and I brought my son with me. And he was able to quickly adapt to it and feel comfortable. And me, I'm like, you ever play a video game and like you just get shot the minute you get out, or
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
the guy who knocks into the walls and you're not sure. So that's me, and that's him. So I think also I don't want to generalize, but maybe also an ageist kind of thing too, that maybe younger generations will take to it really smoothly,
Yeah.
where Gen Xers and Boomers, again, you don't want to generalize, but maybe we may not take so easily to it and not come across well in the interviews. So that's something I guess we have to think about.
yeah. That I mean, I'll adapt. I'm a boomer,
Yeah.
and I'll adapt really quick because I use technology enough to navigate it. But having said that, I think there's going to be two different worlds, because I think, to both you and Tegan's point, you'll have people who will really be immersed in it, and it becomes their world, and there'll be the rest of everybody else who are not a part of that. And the issue is, for a job seeker or for anybody else who wants to make the leap, is being able to adapt.
Yep.
And those who won't be adapt, you really will be light years behind, so to speak, as far as being able to knowing what the jobs that really pay are going to be using these things. And the first companies that are going to be the ones who have the disposable income, so to speak, to be able to experiment and to be able to play, and also customize it to their particular culture and environment, which I think we'll be talking about fairness and a lack of fairness going forward. But that it becomes a very interesting issue that we'll be talking more about in the future. You and I would be watching that and writing about it. Although there's some juicy topics that are coming up that are
Yeah.
just unbelievable. We'll have to talk more about it, but I do want to kind of go on. Michael says that make sure you have a good collection of meta fedoras in your future metaverse shows. That's a good one. Yes, either fedora or a
Dude, you got to make
really
your NFT.
cool
Oh my God.
or
Make a
or a really
Fedora
cool
NFT.
skull cap. Yeah.
Wait. I don't know if like have you heard this? So Nike bought this company. I can't remember the name of it, and it was like an Italian designer, and they made sneakers for avatars, and they made like $3 million in 7 minutes selling those sneakers.
Oh, I
So
believe it.
there's a
It's been
market out
all
there.
over social media, people investing in it. It's insane.
So
Yeah.
Mike, the fedora, so Tuller might not be off base here. You have the fedora, maybe that takes over
Maybe
the
maybe
Dyson
I should go
fedora
ahead
becomes a
and
thing.
yeah, maybe I should be the first making fedoras and some and
Everybody in the metaverse will have
and
fedoras on. It'll be
and
awesome.
and even try to create an NFT around it,
Yeah.
even to really harbor the market, so to speak. But but anyway, I think we could try to bring this a little bit down to earth now. We'll go back to our original question about the one thing that they could expect. I understand your point, Jack. The one thing is the technology and how fast, to add on to that, how fast job seekers are going to be able to adapt to this new world of technology is going to be it's already a thing. But unfortunately, a lot of people are still adapting from they're trying to catch up to 2010, so to speak, much less to 2022. Because yeah, we got the Zoom meetings and those things are being simplified. I mean, really, 90-year-olds are working. My mother's 90 will be 92. She could do Zoom, so
God
that's not a
bless.
big deal. But there's a lot of people who still are struggling with doing the video, whether they should show the picture, they cut out their picture when they do get in the meeting, and then they know how to turn on the audio so they're really a go. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are happening here, but I think the adaption issue is a big deal. Teegan?
Yeah, I think one of the things that job seekers should expect in 2022, to your point, is it isn't 2010 anymore.
Right.
During the recession, employers did more with less. It was expected that you were going to do more and have a pay cut to do more.
Mhm.
Where now in 22, it's if organizations want to thrive, they have to listen to job seekers because we're not taking it anymore.
Mhm.
We need some resemblance of balance, feel appreciated for the work that we're doing, and business as a whole, instead of just suffering and having retention issues, that the workforce be organized in a way that everybody is leveraging their strengths to really grow businesses. And part of that growth is by leveraging new technologies and being able to have teams who are willing to adapt to this change and have that buy-in for the organization. And so I think that employees have made their stance clear. Their employers have to change in 2022. And so for those job seekers who are fleeing from employers who aren't changing, they need to be fleeing to something. And so I would encourage job seekers to really be doing the research on where, not only what they're running from, but where they're running to.
Mhm. Absolutely. And to me, I write for Lenza.com and have been doing so for the past going on 2 months now. One of the things I've been looking at recently, and I think there's this surge of sick leave and how it relates to COVID, and what we're really seeing. The disparity in that there's not just Sherman just is keeping a database as far as a list of what state has laws. There's a lot of cities that are interesting that are in counties that are taking on laws as opposed to their state. That's one thing, but there's really no federal mandate on handling COVID and emergency leave. There's some states that have it, but there's not a federal. They're leaving the federal government's leaving it up to the state. And one of the things I think is going to happen is the fallout. And Jack and I, you and I talked about it. I think there's going to be a healthcare day of reckoning. I don't know if it's going to be 2022, but I think we're on the horizon of it looking a whole lot different in a couple of years from now, because because of the lack of states and all of that. But I think there's just a lack of just to having the vision of what healthcare is going to really look like in the future, and truly, it could possibly happen that people will be on their own as far as sick leave and healthcare, because it seems like every time people say we're going to have a sick leave policy, and they go, yeah, and they said we're going to have personal time off. Yeah, just like they did in the early 90s. The caveat is that you're going to be responsible for your own sick time. And go, whoa, that's where it's all going to stop. So I think that's one thing, job seekers, I think everybody, including people who are working or not, everybody's going to be really looking at what this is going to look like a year or two from now, and really start thinking about what are going to be the options, because this thing is going to break.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are already broken from it.
And that's part of the problem. And I think that's why, people are not going to pay if they had COVID and they happen to be on a ventilator. There's no way they're going to be able to pay their $150,000 hospital bill that the insurance company wouldn't pick up.
Yeah, I've been speaking to so many, people in leadership capacities, whether CEOs or chief people officers, and the overriding concern they have is about the mental health and well-being of their people. And for the first time, because when I first got into the job market, it really didn't care to like no one cared about your mental health and how you're feeling. I'm not saying they were jerks. It was different times. And now, whether the companies really believe it or they just know from a practical business point, they have to take care of their employees and empower them and watch over their mental health and make sure they're not getting burnt out. And if you're remote or you're feeling isolated, and take the measures to take care of them, because they don't, as Teegan mentioned before, they're just going to leave. They're not going to put up with it. And you get like 4 million people a month, are quitting. So these companies realize this is a moment like, oh, we can't take people for granted anymore. We have to really do whatever it takes. And I think for a lot of folks, it's not just money. It's, you have to listen to them and see, do you want to work remote? Do you want hybrid? Do you want to have staggered hours? And so it's not a one size fits all. So I think in 2022, a lot of companies are going to have to reach out and be kind of open-minded and flexible, because Teegan may want one work style, you, Mark, maybe you another, and me another, and try to do it so people are happy. Because if they're not, they're going to leave, and it's going to be very hard to replace them. So that's going to be, I think, the overriding thing, at least for the beginning of 2022. I don't know how it'll play out later on, but I think it's still, that's going to be kind of the top burner thing, especially with Omicron, where you had all these return to office plans. So you make your plans, and then they say, well, nope, you're not going back. And then if you're like a single mother with young kids, but what do you do? And then the schools are closed down. So now what do you do? And
we're going crazy, Jack. That's what we're doing.
Yeah. Are you going through that? Are you going through that now, Teegan? Or
I've got it'll be 4, and oh my goodness.
So how is it? Like
Well, luckily schools are back open here, but a lot of schools in surrounding communities shut down because of how many people had the virus after winter break. 2 weeks of remote learning again, and so some people are already at work, and there's some people who are doing okay. I can work from home. Send all your kids here, and there's some people who are just saying like, look, I can't. I gotta work remote. People are losing their jobs over this. People are. I mean, it's people aren't getting the work done that they need. And then a lot of people, especially younger generations, or, people who chose or couldn't have children, they're getting opportunities that people who do have them aren't able to have. So, somebody who's juggling staying at home with their kid because schools are closed back down again isn't going to get the project that somebody that doesn't have that burden. And so we're seeing some of these discrepancies that have happened, traditionally amongst women now happening across the board with different families, not just women, sometimes men as well, who are working from home and have their children at home as well.
Do you feel that companies sometimes discriminate where they feel if they find out, let's say somebody has a young child, like, well, maybe we'll go to somebody else because maybe they can't give the full attention. Are you hearing that from your clients and your people you deal with?
So for my husband's company, for example, they're really flexible with it. He reports directly into the CHRO. He's within HR, and he fosters it amongst his team. Hey, and he sets the expectation. You will respect my team's boundaries, and we are going to be accepting of this. And that's from top down. But not all organizations are seeing that. And so, yeah, a lot of my clients are saying it's just too much. I got passed up for working with this major client because I have to be flexible with my work, and somebody else got it, and it's going to set me back. And so there's a lot of stress amongst mid-level ambitious professionals who are trying to climb the ranks to get these opportunities that will help catapult them to that senior managing partner director type of position.
That's so unfortunate, right? It's so unfair.
Yeah, and there's also the aspect too that not just the sick leave and what to do, but there's a lack of parental leave as well in this country. I mean, there's only a few states that have. I think there's around 20 states that actually have some kind of parental leave standard or law in their in their state, and some of them, like the sick leave, have catered more specific within their cities and their counties and so forth. But I think overall those are things that are that do wane on the bigger issue is the mental health, because as a parent, if your home situation isn't right, then everything else is pretty much is seen as chaotic through the eyes of a parent. Nobody it's hard to go to work anymore and saying I'm going to work to have a day off from my children. That used to be an old joke, but it's really real now for some people, and some people are fighting accordingly. So all that to be said is that employers are going to have to be smarter and even more creative in their finding solutions to some of these problems. And it's not going to look the same for each company, because I think some companies are looking at other companies and say, okay, what are you going to do? I don't know. Well, what are you going to do? And it becomes this mine. And I've said before that tech companies and the large tech companies are just copycats of each other. If Google says that, well, we're just going to wipe the slate clean with as far as personal time off, and people take as much as they need, believe me, Microsoft and Twitter is not going to be that far behind. So, everybody's kind of waiting on what everybody else is going to do. And if it looks good, they apply to a company. But I don't think it's going to, it should be something that will look the same for everybody. Everybody should try to do something that's going to be right for the culture of their company and for the work that they put out, and also considering their families and so forth. So I think it gets pretty interesting from there. Let's talk about something else that's very interesting. Is that this is, we just talked about one of the obstacles that job seekers will find it tough to overcome. I imagine pets will be something else that
You heard that,
will be something else. But in you guys' view, what's the one obstacle that job seekers are going to find really tough to overcome in 2022? Teegan, why don't you take a stab at it first, since you're the girl in the group?
Sure. So I feel like there's two separate cohorts of job seekers. There's a long-term unemployed, and
Mhm.
there's the currently employed looking for something different. And so the
Mhm.
long-term unemployed has to figure out, where am I getting caught up in this job search process so I can finally land my job? Because I'm starting to see there be a stigma attached to the long-term
Mhm.
unemployed. So people who haven't gotten hired within this past 2 years, is, well, what's wrong with them? And so, in my practice, I team up with a lot of recruitment agencies, and that's starting to that's the feedback I'm starting to hear. Well, why have they been unemployed for 2 years? Well, why did this? Why didn't that? And it's okay. Well, if they don't have a good reason for it being 2 years, if it's, well, I've been trying, versus, well, school shut down, I had to juggle this, somebody got sick, whatever it may be, people are starting to be less forgiving, which is unfortunate because so many organizations were hit hard, or there's that stigma. That
Mhm.
person's not an A player because they're not hired yet, or because they were on the job search. And I see that creeping back in to conversations, whether recruiters will admit it live or not, which is unfortunate. Same thing with hiring managers.
Mhm.
Where on the flip side, there's, people who want to jump on the bandwagon of finding a better company, starting to get on the job search and realizing it's not as easy as they thought it would be. And so figuring out that the job search game has changed. And so, well, now I've got it in my mind, I want a new job. I've applied to a couple places, haven't gotten the job. And then their satisfaction, their current employer, gets even worse, and then their confidence gets even worse because of rejection. And then
Mhm.
they've got to figure out, okay, what's this new way of approaching this job search, realizing that employers are really wanting someone who wants to be there. And so if job seekers aren't doing that research, aren't building relationships with employees at those companies and leveraging those relationships, the tides have turned. I mean, the job search has always been heavily relationship based, but I
Mhm.
feel like now, with us being so separated, organizations are wanting to leverage relationships and cultural ads more than ever.
Yeah, I find that interesting too. Tegan, do you feel like maybe for recruiters, business is good because of all the chaos?
um, Recruiters are hurting right now. I feel for them. It is a very challenging market for both recruiters and job seekers. Good recruiters are gonna foster deep relationships with their candidates and are gonna want the best for their candidate. And I have so many friends who are recruiters and get really excited about this opportunity just to find out that they were given a better offer.
Mhm.
And are equally just as hurt at the lack of transparency throughout the process as a job seeker, getting rejected because they were the one or the two away. And so I do not know a recruiter who isn't getting really nice commission checks right now, but it's not easy for them either.
Right, right. Jack, the resident recruiter. Of course, your niche is completely different than them. Probably is very unique and very specialized. So you probably have a different view. Or do you see that there's a an obstacle? Uh, if there was one that really people remove this would make a difference, and maybe recruiters might, from a recruiter's perspective, what do you see as being that one thing? Can't hear
Oh,
you. We lost your voice.
The
Okay,
dog
there
was
you are.
barking, so I'm sorry. I kind of kept it up. So I have two dogs and two cats. So one of them barking, the other one I think is napping. So I want to echo what Tegan was saying, is that, yeah, for the long-term unemployed, definitely problematic. I say for young people, it's actually harder too, because you look on, let's say, any LinkedIn or other job boards, and you put in, entry level, and they want
Mhm.
2, 3, 4 years of experience, and then how do you get it? Or they make you be an intern to get the experience to then get the job after paying a fortune in tuition.
Mhm.
In terms of the job search process for both recruiters and job seekers, it is challenging because you do still have a lot of companies that just don't get that things have changed. And in a way, I don't want to fault them in the sense that if you've been doing something for the last 10 years and it went one way and now all of a sudden it changes, it's hard for some to kind of recalibrate and say, oh, wait, the game is different. I gotta go and change so that you'll have a candidate looking for a job and they want remote, where so many people do, and the firm will say, no, we don't do remote. It's like, well, why wouldn't you at least be open to the opportunity if so many other companies are doing it and they're getting the best talent? You would think eventually someone would wake up and say, maybe we should have a remote policy or at least a hybrid policy in terms of
Mhm.
compensation where they know it's a really hot job market. But like, well, no, this is the band, this is what we pay. Well, okay, this is what we pay, but this is kind of unprecedented, time, and things are completely different, and it's a very hot job market. Why wouldn't you pay more? But they don't. Job seekers, and Tegan pointed it out, is that so they go in because the narrative is it's such a hot market, it's great. So they go in and think, oh, I'm going to get a lot of offers, and they don't, and that's really horrible on their self-esteem because then they're thinking, why am I not getting an offer? Why aren't I getting a job? They speak to their family and friends, and then their family and friends like, oh, what's wrong with Jack? Why isn't he get the offer? Because they don't realize that it isn't as easy as it looks. Because what I see in part is a distorted market. On one side, it's like barbells. On one side, you have, let's say, all the service workers who are like laid off by the millions, restaurant workers, bars, nail salons, gyms, all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, right? They were laid off, but then all of a sudden they have to bring them back. And so when you bring it back, you see a ton of hiring in that space. But then you see like a ton of hiring. If you look at any job board or any career page of a firm, when you look for technology, boy, you'll just see lists of jobs, software engineer, just like so much. So that's hot. But then you have a lot are, yeah, you know what I mean? Not as much. So I think unfortunately the way the media portrays what's happening, it misleads people into thinking it's hot across the board for everybody, and you just go in the job market and you're going to get a huge offer, and it's doing a disservice for people because you're not really managing their expectations. So I think that's, for all parties involved, it's very frustrating, and it's also kind of alarming in a sense that you would think, at least from the company side, that they would recalibrate and say, wait a minute, if they want remote work, let's figure something out. If they want hybrid, let's figure it out. If we have to pay more money, let's pay more money. If people want more vacation time, let's pay more vacation time. Because if they don't do it, they're not going to hire those people, and then their people are going to leave by attrition, and it's going to get matters worse. So it's a weird. It's definitely what I see. It's just a very odd kind of market. It's
Yeah.
very different than we've seen before.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something that I would say that there's the one obstacle is that I think that job seekers they don't listen closely enough to the waves of a lot of this is happening. I mean, when the first we saw the Great Resignation come up, people thought it was a club that they would join. So so let me get a membership so
Yeah.
I can get it. Well, and expose them and said, well, you had a lousy presentation before the Great Resignation. Now it just shows even more because you can't even get anybody to give you a call. And that's sad. And I think one of the other things that are beginning to happen now is that the Great Resignation is happening, and people still are trying to do just enough to get by. And I'm not just talking about people who you think I'm talking about the people who are hourly rate. I think there are people who are on the senior level professionals that are also doing this, and they've been doing it in the past. And I think the propensity is that people just don't take how tough it can be very seriously if you don't have everything together that you need for a job search. And when we're talking, I think more beyond resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles. I think it sometimes even comes down to getting very specific about and very clear about what you want and the job you want. And instead, you're taking everything that keeps falling short of that, and you keep falling around the same cycles again. So it's like the old behaviors, they're trying to put in new, trying to make it fit in the new waves of employments and job search trends, and they don't fit anymore. So, if you've been looking, I'm afraid if you never looked since 2020, February 2020, you're going to get left behind because you think that the 2019 rules still apply. Some of them do apply. The aspect of networking still works, is all work. There's always going to be about people hiring people. But I think there's a other aspect as well, is not paying attention to what's going to work for the job that you really want. And for some people, they don't really want something. They just want a job to pay a bill. But the other part, the people who really want something don't get it because they don't pay attention to what that market calls for. So I think that still remains a big chunk of folks who still cannot seem to make the adjustments that they need to make to get that job that they really want.
You know what's interesting too, Tegan? Have you seen this? I'm blown away by like how many new different companies are out there. Where if you go on any, let's say just LinkedIn, and you look down, like half the names I've never heard of them before, but then you look a little deeper, and they have huge venture capital money, they have third rounds of finance. I'm like, so that's something really different I noticed within the last year. Are you seeing that with your clients, where all of a sudden they're talking about these companies, like you have to start Googling who are they, what they are, and they turn out to be big companies, but really new.
Yeah, I'm excited by it. Crunchbase is a database where you can see where they're at in seed funding and different rounds of capital. And it's really exciting because you get all this data and you've got to subscribe to it, or even Bob Goodwin has a program where he created a custom CRM leveraging that kind of data. And you can look and find these companies that otherwise don't have enough presence on these job boards to rank high enough, because they don't pay the companies enough money for their job searches to be high. So you don't know about them, but they're fantastic opportunities. And for a lot of people that are running from antiquated organizations, are excited about the opportunity to work for an organization that saw a need within society, figured out how to solve for it, raised enough money to be able to get it started, and are aggressively hiring. And so a lot of the senior level professionals that I'm working with, these once small startups who have now, taken off during COVID, are looking for that senior level leader from a bigger organization who can come in and take over to get them to the next step in their growth phase. And so for passive candidates who typically wouldn't have thought about leaving before, with resources like Crunchbase, are thinking like, wow, that sounds exciting. And some boomers who are thinking about retiring are thinking, well, maybe I have another go. Maybe I will take on the CEO position here and see what I can make of it before I put my fedora up. And it's exciting. And so I see it as a perk. Obviously, we know, like, we're Mark and I are in the Midwest. They look at job hoppers a little bit differently than California. But if you're in Silicon Valley, going from startup to startup to startup isn't as scary, because that's the cultural norm. Where now in other parts of the world, we're starting to see more startups. So there is a risk that it may not work. But once you get through certain growth periods, especially if you're bringing on the right type of talent, it's an exciting opportunity for job seekers and these companies as well, and attracting some talent that these other mega organizations aren't willing to keep up with. Like Apple announcing that they're having their teams return back to work, they're pissed. And so it's no wonder why other companies are attracting that talent.
Do you think it's like a good, smart move where, let's say, let's take pre-pandemic times. Most people, when they look for a job, they're looking for like these brand names. Let's say you want to work on Wall Street. All right, I want to go to Goldman. I want to go to Morgan Stanley. These, maybe now you do something different. Go to Crunchbase or other sites like that, and let's see some of these cool places, and find out what resonates with you. Because maybe there's a certain industry. Maybe it's like the wellness industry. Like, hey, that really speaks to me. Let me look. Thinking that the competition is not going to maybe look at that place, especially when you said more senior people. They may be still in that mindset, oh, I got to work for a Morgan Stanley or Citigroup or JP Morgan. So they're not going to even bother. So do you think they would have a better shot going to those places because there's just not the same competition?
Yes, but I think it's deeper than that. I think that the reason why these companies are attracting talent is because we know that a lot of these organizations are the same, right? It's a different name, but it's the same. And so to get something that's a little different, where maybe politics don't run as deep, or that certain cultural practices that are so deeply embedded within the organization, that's not going to change anytime soon. And you were at one company and had a great career there for some time, but you just eventually didn't want to put up with it. So then went to the next amazing name brand company, and it's the same thing over again. And you climbed a little bit higher. And now you're looking to more so align your values, your internal drivers, with your external drivers that employment can satisfy for you. And so I think it's so much deeper and tied to people's why. Like you said, I want to work for a nutrition company because of what they speak for, or I want to work with this type of company or I want to work with, maybe I don't know what industry, but I know that I want these types of values. And now that more companies are starting to market themselves that way, and there are access to existing employees who are willing to speak about it, I think it's a fantastic things like companies are doing. Like, I don't know, have you heard of FAST, where they the CEO gave away all those t-shirts with a tag, and they've got all their employees. If someone reaches out to them saying, hey, learn about FAST, I'll talk to you about it, the CEO is encouraging, stop working and talk to somebody who's
excited. Wow, I haven't heard of that. That's interesting. Yeah, see, this is why I said I got to get my pen to write that. So I'll look at that. That's interesting.
He's big on Instagram.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, so, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so it's booming, and like you said, the tech industry is booming. So you've got to fight for this talent. And so how do you get them to do that? You excite your people, you treat your people well, and you get your people to bring their friends in, because the competition is fierce.
But I think too that there's, I was going to say, I think we need to make the point here that the ceiling of entry is a lot lower than the more established companies. In other words, they're the ones, the newer companies are willing to take the time and teach people these new skills. So for instance, you don't have to go to get the college degree necessarily now, especially with the new companies, with the newer technologies, because nobody knows the technologies except the companies, and in many cases. So you can really hop up, make more, and make more money, and learn the new technologies, so that maybe when it is time to leave, when it is time to go, you can go from a year from now, because you've learned something that really most of the competition really doesn't know. So even if you're a baby boomer, and you're somewhat tech savvy, and if you could show that you add value many other ways, they'll be willing to teach you that job, because they have the resources, they're interested, and they're evangelizing, so to speak, to recruit in that particular instance. Well, so when companies start doing that, that means that they're looking for all kinds of different talents, not just the one standard young guy that just graduated, or a young girl that just graduated from college. They're looking at, this person has functionality in these particular areas, so it will make it easier to get hired in those. And even if they lasted a year and a half, that's great, because that means you've learned something that you could take somewhere else, based on that company was leading the way, and you're just jumping on the bandwagon that somebody's doing it a little bit better.
Yeah, Mark, when you say young people, Teegan, I'm curious what you think. I noticed with like a lot of these startup-y kind of companies, they tend to, I don't want to say they're ageist, but they tend to see, they look for people with just a few years of experience. And if you ever see like their web pages, they're all like young people. They don't see, like me and Mark we're not on there. They don't see our kind of bios. If you notice that too, and do you think that could be challenging for a more senior person to do, or just keep trying anyway and see?
Honestly, yeah, there are those companies out there, right? Yeah. There's always going to be, but the majority of companies that I'm seeing have deep pockets because they just got funding, have a need to be able to grow, and they are willing to invest in someone who they otherwise wouldn't have been able to get if they couldn't have enticed them with a massive jump in base salary, obnoxious sign-on bonus, as well as equity deals. And so I'm not seeing it a lot, Jack and Mark, how you guys might be seeing it. I'm actually seeing these companies are fighting for best in class talent because their pockets are deep. They just got more funding and they're ready to invest in talent, because the quickest way for a CEO to burn out is by doing it all themselves. They need that team to be able to keep going. And so I see a lot of CEOs really investing in brilliant talent. And so, but I mean, that just might be who is in my network.
No, I like what you're saying, T, because I wonder, you got me thinking, is there kind of, and you mentioned it, I couldn't recall the gentleman's name, but if there's like a rubric or something you put together where it's almost like, okay, let's look at crunch, but then look at how much money was raised, and let's like look at these metrics, and that might be for a job. So you can say, wait a minute, this looks like, hey, they have a lot of money right now, and they only have X amount of employees, and they got to grow. Maybe I could get some really good options. So kind of, it's almost like changing the whole way you look for a job. Instead of saying, okay, I'm looking for job X, I'm just going to scroll looking for job X. It's like, all right, let me look for these companies that are flush with cash. They are, you know what I mean? They have a war chest now to hire people and bring in. And maybe that's a better 2022 way of looking at a job search. Forget about the old ways, but let's look at who has the money to pay a whole heck of a lot of money. And as Mark said it before, because with Silicon Valley, the turnover rate is like the largest anywhere. So so even if you stay there a year or two, you get some options, and maybe, they don't, you can walk away with them. And then you go on to use that to leverage to go into the next one. That might be the 2022 move. To go back to your initial question, Mark, the beginning of the show, maybe that's like the move, like changing, like just ripping up the script and just starting to look at completely different.
I think they do have to really think about shedding some of the old ways and expectations that don't exist. The narrative that we have to have so much experience, that doesn't exist anymore. All you need is that the acumen in some cases, not in all cases, and that's not shedding on what Teegan just said about them looking for the best talent. But in some cases, they're looking for the talent that are able to adapt to their climate and their culture as well. So, there are opportunities in all kinds of spreads. People just need to be very thoughtful about their jumps, and then not to be reckless in thinking they hear this information and that's all I have to do. No, there's a lot more. There's a well to dig. So to speak, and you want to dig that well, not just to set up for this job that you want now, but you want to set up for the next 2 or 3 jobs and show that you can adapt, and to be able to also do that at home, no less, because nobody wants to babysit and have, especially if you're a new company. That's not to say that they're not willing to teach either. But I think there's just an opportunity to really be to make thoughtful jumps rather than reckless ones, or the assuming that they're going to hire you because everybody looks for these things, and that may not particularly be true.
Yeah, it's interesting, Teegan, to go back to what you were saying about like all these other old school companies. They're all kind of the same. And I was just kind of writing about Coinbase, big cryptocurrency exchange. And they're like, no, you know what? We're going to take 4 weeks off. Boom, just like that.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, we need 4 weeks off to recharge and recover. And don't worry, you don't have to go on Slack or anything. You're good. You're not going to see Citigroup do that, or JP Morgan, right? You're not going to see IBM saying, okay, 4 weeks off for everybody. It's not going to happen. And that's a big differentiator at this point in time. We're like, you know what? I'll be honest, 4 weeks to just chill, that seems really nice.
Yeah.
Right?
And the opportunities like Mark was talking about, I've got a client who was an executive admin at a Fortune 100 company, who got in at a startup and is now the chief of staff. And so she went from making like $65,000 to having equity in this company. And I mean, just she's making stupid money. Like it just makes no sense. And she's like, I can't believe this is my life, all because she took a chance on an up and coming company. And so there's some risk to it, but there's risk at any point in with whatever company you decide to go with. So I'm all for expanding on what type of companies people will take into consideration when it comes to their job search.
You know, it's so interesting you say that, because not just 2022, but like from late 20, even like 2021 till now, it almost seems like an era of anything is possible. You know, whether you're buying NFTs and making a fortune, meme stocks, whatever the cryptocurrency of the moment is. And it just seems like if you're at the right place at the right time, you're just hitting it out of the ballpark. And it's just weird and wild and crazy and cool. On one hand, it's awesome. The other hand is like, damn it, why did I buy that whatever cryptocurrency? Or why did I do that? Damn it. You know, it's a really weird thing. And I think it's also, to Mark, to your question about 2022, I think there's going to be a lot of FOMO, right? Where you're going to want to go somewhere, take a job, maybe get like Teegan's, client, and get like that stock options. And so that you could, have that YOLO trade, and that makes your whole life. And it's definitely a whole different mindset for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think this just, for those of us who write about it all the time, like you and I, this is great. The chaos is wonderful because we have more to write about and more to talk about as we approach time going on.
Yeah, but just between us three, Mark, just between us three, I gotta admit, I don't compare myself to others, but it's sometimes really hard when I'm speaking to a guy who's half my age, who just raised like $100 million, and their company has a $10 billion valuation. I'm like, what the hell did I do wrong with my life? What's going on? What did I do? What's wrong with me? God damn it!
Yeah, well, we all make choices, and the whole idea is that you grow content and that you're happy with what you've got. In the meantime, being a little bit jealous of somebody who just got a.
You know what it is too? I've noticed a lot of these, I'll say kids, but they're young. They're 20s to early 30s, maybe.
Right.
A lot of them are really nice. So it's not even like you can say, oh, they're rotten, horrible people. Oh, right. They're very pleasant. Maybe they're very pleasant because they're sitting on stock worth, $100 million. So would it be pleasant? Could be that. Or maybe that's how they got there, because they're super nice people. So it's like, I've never seen it like this before. It's just really, it used to be growing up. Who were the ones they're the very rich old people, right? Now, it's like, you don't know. You could go down the street and see someone who looks like a bum, and this person's worth like $1 billion. It's because they were in the right place at the right time.
Well, the access to information and knowledge is right at our fingertips, right? We don't have to go down to the library or create time to go to the library for a couple of hours a week and look stuff up. We can just go to internet and not even set up a computer. You just go ahead and use your phone. It's right there in front of you, and you can access that information. As I said all the time, if you're not constantly looking at how to, get more information, connect to better people, or connect to more people, and doing those things on a regular basis, you're kind of like doing it like 1969. You're waiting for crisis, and that's just not a good way to do it. You got to always be plugged in and always be looking at the next step in your career. So, I'm not going to say my usual cliche, but I think it's true, is that's something that is a part of your life. And that's something that that's not something you wait for because something's about to happen or it had happened before. And a lot of these kids they understand that, they obsess over it, and they obsess over it until they get it. Now, still, that's a very small amount of people, comparatively, that actually have those kind of things actually happen. But I think the access and the possibilities are there a lot faster, quicker, and easier because the lines have been erased now. It's seamless.
There's a lot of risk in our society when it comes to being an entrepreneur compared to other societies.
Yeah.
And so when you look at our cultural norms, being an entrepreneur is not something our society rewards. Just look at how the healthcare system works.
Mhm.
So in other parts around the world, entrepreneurship is encouraged. Governments encourage it. Solve our problems, make our world a better place. Where here it's no, let's work for the big names and be satisfied with our check and live paycheck to paycheck because we're buying all these extravagant things instead of building all of these amazing things. And so I think that there's starting to be a cultural shift in America that what used to be the American dream, the 9 to 5, the white picket fence, the 2.5 kids or whatever it is, I don't know, has changed, and there's so many more opportunities. Well, no, we don't want things the way that they used to be, because there's, going back to the mental health piece, that's not what's going to bring me the most personal fulfillment. And so I want personal fulfillment and I want professional success. So I have to go a different route to get there. And so when we see these people who are willing to take that risk, it's like, oh man, it's been ingrained in me since I was little to be risk adverse. Don't jump off of that. Be careful. All of these things that we're taught. So when we see somebody go outside of what's so deeply ingrained in us, it's like, man, I wish I had the courage to do that. And some of us do have the courage to do that, and it's exciting. And some of us will be on the team for the person who did it and reap the benefits along with the original founder. So there's lots of ways to look at it.
Yeah, the opportunities are they continue to be endless, but I think that the most creative actually is going to get the bigger piece of the pie, not necessarily the smarter one. And depending upon how you want to look at creative and smart, it depends on you. But I think a lot of it is, when people are needing something to get done, they start to look to create the opportunity for it, not just wait for it to come to them. So all that being said, we're coming.
Wow, that was quick. I'm just
Yeah,
looking
I
at the
know.
time now.
2
That was
minutes to
quick.
the top of
Yeah.
the hour. Teegan, you must come back to us. Is there anything that we should look for you in the future? You got a podcast episode coming up. You got an interview. You could be quoted somewhere. What's the one thing you want everybody to know that you can brag about yourself at this particular time?
So, Mark, I'm a heartthrob when it comes to community involvement. And a huge need that I've seen within the job search space is people do not have access to funds or aren't willing to invest funds in getting quality job search services. And so I am doing a complete website redesign, the whole entire portal of free resources. And I'm still going to have my paid for resources,
Right.
but I'm really excited to be able to offer that because I'm tired of people having to pay for these garbage templates. I just want to give them to people. And so that is what I'm looking forward to most. And I've had some amazing collaborations recently, an executive salary negotiation training on how to look at different tax benefits, as well as how to break it up, to have for individuals who are high earners. And so that's going to be a lot of fun as well to go ahead and push that out, because we leave so much money on the table that I want more people to have it. And so those are my top 2 things that I'm looking forward to in the next couple of months.
Awesome.
That's great. That's awesome. Good for
Jack,
you.
what you got coming up?
One of the things we're doing, started this podcast, Happy at Work, with a couple of people who, when I was speaking at Harvard, kind of hit it off, and we're doing it. So it's been really cool because we're getting, really interesting guests like Bob Langer, the co-founder of Moderna, like 2 Formula One race car driver CEOs, Mark Decano, a congressman, is pushing for a 4-day work week. So right now we taped a bunch, but we're going to kind of edit it and clean it up and then start posting it. But it's really great because it's like this conversation when you have, smart people just talking and sharing ideas, everyone benefits from it. Everyone learns something and walks away feeling a little smarter. So it's pretty neat. So far it's going really well.
Good deal.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It is. It is. Jack, you probably remember our session with Hannah Morgan and Robin Ryan. That is up on the podcast now. I
Nice.
published it. And so, yeah, just a great response. And I think it's a great show.
You
And
know
it's
what's
a
good
lot of,
too? I'm sorry,
go
Mark.
ahead.
You know what's good too is like, so Rob is really gracious. I needed some help with certain things, and if you remember at the end of the show, she said, "Oh, let me know." And she and I had a long conversation yesterday. That was great. I
Okay,
mean,
great.
and that's what some of these things are so awesome. So I needed guidance and advice in something she was really well versed in,
Hmm.
and she took the time out and walked it through. So yeah, so these kind of things, it's for the viewers, but selfishly for us, it's nice to interact and learn, and what I
Yep.
mean, contribute and give back, and so it's real. I think it's so valuable what we do. And it's
Yeah.
so much fun to do as well.
Yeah, Tegan, behind the scenes, we actually, I think after the show ended with Robin, we spent like an extra 30, 45 minutes or an hour or something
Yeah.
talking. And she is a wealth of knowledge, especially uh, being one of the first ones to do what we do. She's like the grandmother, so to speak,
Yeah,
of
like she was on Oprah. She was on Oprah for her book and Dr. Phil. I
Dr.
mean,
Phil. I know.
and this
Yeah,
is
I
go
know.
and I like, and she was like, "Oh yeah," and she said, "Oh, it's a video." So I'm like, "Let me check out the video." And it's like a 1980s video. You're like, what you're wearing in the 80s is like a whole different world. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is
Yes.
wild." So she's the OG of like this,
Yes. She's
career
the true
advice and
OG.
stuff, right?
I love
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was great. So that's a great episode. So you'll be seeing me talk more about that. I wish I can do a little bit more with it, and I can. But there's also the video up on Job Secret Nation channel, YouTube, and for the rest of you who wanted, you could check that out. One of my favorite conversations out of so many that I've had over the years. So love that. In the meantime, next week we'll be back at 1 p.m. Eastern. And thank you very much for joining Job Secret
Excellent.
Nation. Deacon, thank you very much. Yourcareer.today is where she's at. So you don't want to miss that. And get her resources and keep us posted on what you're updating there, Tegan. Uh,
Yes, thanks so much for having me on.
It was a
sure.
pleasure
Thank
meeting you.
you. In the
Mark, it's good seeing you
meantime,
again, buddy.
yeah, yep. We've got to talk a little bit offline at some point. But peace in the valley of love. I'll see